Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Holocaust Genocide Interfaith Education Center event, sponsored with Department of Religious Studies and also the Grove Institute at St. Louis, our Lasallian college, that we do a lot of interfaith events with over Zoom, really, but they weren't available, but they are saying hello, and thank you to my Department of Religious Studies for being a co-sponsor. So it is Women's History Month, and Simran is not a woman, but he comes from the Sikh tradition. And one of the things I was thinking about this week was how we don't really recognize Sikh women. We don't really see them, they're invisible, we don't think about them as having agency, and we really focus on the turban, right? I mean, so it's a masculinized sort of perspective and stereotype. So what I wanted to do, and this is very brief before I introduce Simran, is to show you some of 5 different women that I think have been powerful throughout the Sikh tradition. Mata Kivi, who played a significant role in spreading Sikh teaching to women and ensuring that women were seen as equal. She expanded the Sikh tradition of langar, the free kitchen, and some of my students here know what the langar is from the 100 level. Mata Sundari, she managed the Sikh religion when her husband, Guru Gobind Singh, died, and under her management, Sikhism flourished for 40 years. That is amazing, right? So you see leadership in religion, but no recognition on a global level. Mai Baho was the first woman to fight in Punjab, which is a province that lies both in India and Pakistan. Mai was the only surviving Sikh in the Battle of Mukhtasar on December 29, 1705. Afterwards, she became a bodyguard of Guru Gobind Singh. A bodyguard. We're talking about 1705, right? The power and the strength and the courage. And Sophia Dulip Singh was the daughter of Maharaja Dulip Singh, who was exiled to England after the British Empire took over his kingdom. She was an important suffragette in the British suffragette movement. During World War I, she joined the Red Cross to help Sikh troops. Incredible stories that we have never heard before. And the last, Gulab Khair, was a freedom fighter apart from the Ghadar party. She was in charge of printing, distributing party literature. When her husband returned to India to partake in the struggle there, she chose to go back. On her entrance with the other Ghadaritism, she was imprisoned and tortured at Lahore's Shahi Villa. So that's just sort of a taste of the amazing power of these women. So when we talk about Women's History Month, it's for me as a religious studies person, it's so important to talk about leaders in what we call religion. We don't see them, they're very invisible, but one of the things that I'm constantly trying to do is bringing the perspective of gender into these traditions and revive some of our beautiful sacred traditions in literature in terms of scripture and re-looking at scripture and thinking about how we can think about these traditions as being giving equal rights and human rights to everybody. So without further ado, I'm really honored that Simran is here tonight. He is somebody I met about 10 years ago, around the time that I got this appointment at Manhattan College. I remember the last time I saw him was downtown City Hall doing some kind of anti-hate initiative. And he's just been someone I've admired from afar and up close. And he has been touring around the nation with his amazing book that I want to hear about tonight. So I want to welcome him. I'm just going to say a few things about Simran. He's now the Executive Director of the Religion and Society Program at the Aspen Institute. He is the author of the best-selling The Light We Give, How Sikh Wisdom Can Transform Your Life. And the award-winning children's book, Fauja Singh Keeps Going, the true story of the oldest person to ever run a marathon. That was published in 2020. And Singh is an Atlantic Fellow for Racial Equity with Columbia University, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, a Soros Equality Fellow with the Open Society Foundations, a visiting lecturer at Union Seminary. And he earned his graduate degrees from Harvard and Columbia. And in 2020, Time Magazine recognized him as one of 16 people fighting for a more equal America. So let us please welcome, and we are so honored to have you, Simran, Dr. Singh.
Hi everyone, good evening. It's great to be with you all. I'll start by saying what an honor it is to be here and to be back with you, Manaz. We've met, as she said, about 10 years ago, and sometimes in life people stand out and you find people with shared values and worldviews, and one of the things that I've admired about Manaz and following her work over the last decade is her commitment to showing up for everyone, not just herself and not just for her own community. You don't see that often, and it's one of the reasons when you reached out, I said, I'll show up whenever you ask me to. So thank you. I'm happy to talk a bit about my book, but I think what I'm hoping to do is really do what I've learned in my own pedagogy, meaning what does it look like to connect with people, to share information and insights in a way that feels meaningful. And so part of what I want to foreground for you all is this is a method that I want to share with you and model. And it's not something that many of you who are professors here, you already know this. Others of you may be teachers or educators in other ways. But I think for all of us, there is something really powerful about a way of engaging people through story that I've learned through my own work. And so I want to share with you all what that looks like. And I think it'll be way more interesting for me to tell you stories than it would be to give you facts. And so that's what I'm aiming for here. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that approach later if you'd like, but I'll just jump right into my own story. My story begins in a place that's very far away and very different from here. You might have heard of it, it's called Texas. That's where I grew up. I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. And I don't know why my parents thought that would be a good place to raise 4 boys with turbans and brown skin and the facial hair that would eventually come. But they did, and that's where all 4 of us were born and raised. And we were, at the time, the only family in all of South Texas, not just our city, but in all of South Texas that wore turbans. And so you can probably imagine, or maybe you can't imagine, what that was like. And part of our challenge was the daily questions that came our way. And one of the things I want to share with you is those questions, while we recognize them as reminders that we were outsiders, they weren't always malicious. In most cases, I would say, especially as a young kid, 4 or 5 years old, I remember, it's just your classmates or people down the street saying, hey, why do you wear that? Why do you look that way? Why do you speak that language? What are you eating for lunch? Right, like very, very simple, innocuous, everyday questions. And I would say also, my brothers and I didn't receive them as challenges. I mean, sure, they were reminders that we were not typical in the way that other people might have perceived. But we still saw ourselves very much as Americans. I mean, sports, that's what we grew up on. When I was in San Antonio in the 90s, the Spurs got good. That was the real religion of San Antonio. So like, we were locked up with everyone. Cowboys were good then too. That was our team. So sports really like brought us all together. Every day was school. We were with our friends, and I think initially maybe people were curious or unsure about who we were, and over time you break those barriers, you become friends, and the questions really stop after that, right? So in many ways we saw ourselves as very typical. And at the same time, as we got older, the difficulties that came our way became more and more intense. And they became sharper and sharper in us having to figure out what our identity was. Were we Americans or were we Sikhs? Were we Texans or were we Punjabis? I mean, like, these were the daily questions for us. Not in ways that we were sitting around at the dinner table asking, how do we fit in? But in the sense that in our heads, we weren't quite sure, ever, if we really belonged. And I want to share with you a few moments where situations arose that gave me clarity, both in terms of who I was and what I was about, and also raised some really important questions that I had to learn how to navigate. The first took place when I was in 4th grade. My older brother's 5th grade class party was at a roller skating rink right across the fields where we would play basketball. Our baseball fields and our soccer fields were there. And we go into this roller skating rink. And we'd been there dozens of times before, but the manager must have been new because this man comes over at us and he's shouting. He's saying, "Get out of here with those damn rags on your heads." And we'd been in situations like this enough before. I mean, we're young, right? I'm 10 years old at the time. We've been in situations like this before. I knew enough that my mom was there, she could handle it, we could let her do it. And so we went on the side, hung out at the arcade waiting for resolution so we could go skate with our friends. And after about 10 minutes, my mom is still at the counter, we're getting impatient, and I go and I pull on the back of her kameez, her shirt, her long, like a tunic, I guess. And she turns around and she's crying. And I'd never seen her cry before. And so I'm about 10, I just start crying too. and she says, she puts her arm around me and she says, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Well, the same reason as you, of course. Like, this isn't fair. You should let us skate. What's the problem?" And she says, "Oh, I'm actually crying for a different reason. I'm crying because we're so lucky." And I looked at her and I said, what is going on in your head right now? There's nothing to feel lucky about. Like, you must be confused about this situation. And she says, "Well, I shared with the parents and the teachers and your classmates what's happening, and they've all agreed to walk out together." As a 10-year-old, right, I didn't have the language to understand what I was feeling in this moment, right? The best I could say was that this was the first time that I felt that my friends had my back, that they cared enough about me to give up something that they wanted so that I could have what I deserved to. I mean, that sacrifice, which we now would describe as solidarity, or at least I have language for it now in that way, right? I would call it solidarity. I didn't know how to describe it then, but I knew in that moment how it felt. And I knew that it was something that I wanted to reciprocate as I got older. I wanted to do this for other people as well. And there were a couple of other lessons that I took away from this experience. One is, the easiest thing for my mom in that moment would have said, "Let's let our principles slide for a moment, right? Let's take off those turbans. You go skate, no big deal, you can put them back on tomorrow." She didn't do that. That wasn't an option. The next easiest thing, if you think about it, would be for her to say, "Hey, let's go home. We're not going to cause a mess. They'll enjoy their party. We'll miss out today. We'll have fun again tomorrow." Relatively harmless, right? My brothers and I probably would have gotten over it in a day. Our friends probably wouldn't have really noticed. Maybe after 5 minutes, if they were upset, they would have gotten over it, and everything would have been fine. But what did she do instead? She took the opportunity to share with people what was happening. She invited them in. She didn't tell them what to do, but she gave them the opportunity to care. And that opening that she created, it's so different than what we do culturally today. Right? We expect people to know what's happening in every community. If people don't show up for one another, then we judge them and get upset. Right? That level of engagement, that opportunity to connect is not there. I'll share with you this line I found from James Baldwin years later that really speaks to this lesson for me. He says, "If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see." And I think about that as an educator, right? That's what education is to me. But I also think about that as inviting people into our experiences, knowing that their lives are different from ours, giving them the chance to care, giving them the chance to show up, and not judging them for how they show up, but just inviting them. It was a big lesson for me as a 10-year-old. And there was a third lesson that I took away from this that really has informed my worldview since. And it draws straight from Sikh philosophy. And it's what is it about this experience where a mom is standing with her kids, they're being discriminated against, she should feel powerless. I mean, I have kids about that same age now. I would be so upset, I'll tell you, I probably would not have reacted in the way that she did. What is it that in this moment of complete powerlessness, someone is able to find their agency? To the point that they can show up in the way that they want to and walk away feeling thankful. And I think that's a real question of our times, right? We all have challenges in our lives. It doesn't always look like this. But what is it that we can do that we're walking away feeling proud of how we reacted, feeling thankful for the outcome, no matter what it is? I think that's what we're all looking for. And so for me, part of what I saw in my mom was this way of engaging that moved beyond our instinct of fight or flight. She could have argued with the manager all day. She didn't. She could have taken us home, left the rink. She didn't do that either. And she found what in religious studies we might call a middle path, right? A different way of engaging, an alternative. And I think especially in a country right now, and in a context right now where things feel so polarized, everything feels black and white, that fight and flight instinct is always popping up. I think there's a real model for us. I mean, seeing what my mom did in this moment, but also what this can look like for each of us as we encounter difficulties. So this is me. I mean, it sounds a lot smarter than how I thought about it as a 10-year-old. So I've been processing it a lot since, but I'll tell you, this really shaped how I understood and how I thought about the daily racism that came our way. A second touch point for me comes about 8 years later. I'm a senior in high school, semester's just started, and we're walking in passing period, and I hear rumors that there's been a terrorist attack in New York City. I don't tell this part of the story in the book, but I'll tell you all as folks who will get this. I made a joke when I heard this rumor to one of my friends. I remember it, I'm embarrassed by it. But I made a joke. I said to my friend who told me, I said, "Oh, I hope they weren't wearing turbans." And given the seriousness of the attacks, it wasn't funny. And also it revealed something to me as I look back in retrospect. Already at this point, at 18 years old, I knew that life would get difficult for me based on previous experiences, right? Not just history, but personal experience of what happens when you come to be seen as the nation's enemy. And I'll tell you, that's pretty much what happened, right? So for the next few hours, we're at my high school history teacher's classroom watching the Twin Towers come down. Like many of you, tell you every detail of that morning, what it felt like. I mean, very vivid. And perhaps one of the most striking moments for me was when the anchor announced, we have a suspect. And they mention Osama bin Laden. I've never heard his name before. And then they show his image on the screen. And all my friends in the room look over at me. And it's this strange thing because they knew me enough to know that I wasn't that. Right? So I didn't have a feeling of judgment. It was this feeling of deep concern. Like they knew as much as I knew that for me, shit was about to hit the fan. That life was going to change forever. Maybe they didn't know the forever part. I remember thinking that. And I'll tell you, that's exactly what happened. That afternoon, before school ended, my mom came and picked my brothers and me up from school. We went home, we didn't talk, locked the door, which was notable only because we lived in a neighborhood where we hadn't locked the door our entire lives. Locked the door, watched the news, and the death threats started coming that day. First by phone, and then by people driving by. And the death threats continued for a couple of weeks. Excuse me. It was intense. I felt equal parts angry and frustrated, and also concerned and fearful. And I think as I've talked to friends and people all over this country about the aftermath, I mean, I think that was the general feeling that we all had, right? Angry, frustrated, concerned, fearful. Like this uncertainty of what was going to happen to our country in a time when we hadn't really experienced violence, not in this way on our soil. We had the sense that we were invincible. And all of a sudden that was shattered. And for me, I'll tell you, as we started to receive the reports of hate crimes against Muslims and South Asians and Sikhs around the country, I felt a couple of things happen, right? On the one hand, I felt doubly attacked, right? I felt attacked as an American, and then also as a Sikh. And again, this feeling that I had as a kid, which was like, am I this or am I that? And kind of feeling like I don't want to be either of those things, right? Like those are trouble. And so hiding out at home was kind of a nice answer for a little bit. But of course, it's not a long-term solution. And I knew that as an 18-year-old. The other thing that I start to realize during this period is that up until this point in my life, my approach to dealing with people's racism had been to ignore it. My parents had always said, turn the other cheek, let it go, be the bigger person, right? When they go low, we go up. My parents didn't say that, that was Michelle Obama, but you get the sense. But that had been my approach, and it served me well. We got out of a lot of tough situations by letting things go. And in this moment, I started to realize, especially as people in my community started to be killed in these hate crimes, I started to realize actually, by ignoring people's racism, I might be less safe. My family might be less safe. And maybe I should be proactive. Maybe I should take it on. And that was a big moment for me, this realization. That in some contexts, in some cases, and even in my own life, ignoring racism was in a certain form of privilege. And it's a weird thing to think about, and it's a weird thing to say. Even as I'm saying it right now, it feels, there's something uncomfortable about saying that. But I think in my own life, I was starting to recognize that the approach of ignoring and deflecting hate was only exacerbating the problem. And that if I didn't deal with it, then someone else would get it worse than me. Part of what we start to see in this moment is a real racialization of the Sikh identity. And I want to tell you what this means, and I want to tell you what this looks like for me. The short of it, and you'll understand this just as I say it, because of how I looked, people began to see me as public enemy number one. Turban, beard, brown skin, I fit the stereotype. People make a one-to-one connection, and they're scared of me, and they hate me. And I know that because they would tell me those things, and they would call me those names wherever I went. The challenge for me, and I think it's a challenge we all face in some way, is I have a very clear understanding of who I think I am. Right, we all do. To me, as a Sikh, the turban represents the values that I try to live by, right? So, love, service, justice, those are my values, right? Every morning when I tie my turban, that's what I'm thinking about. But what do people see when they see me, when they see my turban? Hate, terrorism, misogyny, homophobia, I mean, whatever it is that they're ascribing, there's this real dissonance between how I see myself and how other people see me. And the challenge becomes, yes, I can tell myself all day my inherent worth is not tied up in other people's perceptions of me. I think that's true. But I also now have to recognize and grapple with that other people's perceptions are not just their problem, right? They can have real consequences for my life. And what does it look like for me to be firm in who I am, to have a clear sense of how I want to live, to not be shaken by other people's stereotypes or assumptions, and also to take seriously what is in their hearts. That's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing, especially when it would be easier not to. There's one other thing I want to offer here, and it comes through this conversation around racialization, and I think, especially being with you, Minaz, and thinking about what this center, really what your department is thinking about in a way that I think is special. I want to share with you all what the experience of the Sikh community was like during this period, and I should mention that, can I call you Kevin, or sorry? So he was I should have mentioned this earlier, he was, well, I may misrepresent your story, so you can correct me, but he was an MTA driver, subway.
Train operator.
Train operator, thank you. And if I remember correctly, went to Ground Zero and saved a bunch of folks that morning.
Long story short, the building fell that destroyed our ability to move the train, so I had to get all the people out, and I backed the train up did back up and just drove it in the ground. I got like 800 people out of Wall Street, and then the second building was falling down when we were evacuated.
Yeah, thank you. And then later, ended up having to fight the MTA to be able to wear his turban without insignia, right? So like this real dissonance again of like, what does it mean to be an American, literally saving American lives on the most devastating day in this country's history, and then also to be misunderstood and unknown and then mistreated because people just don't get you. So thank you for that. And part of what I'm trying to say here is, in this moment, what's happening in this country is what I've described in some of my work as a new de facto racial category in America, the racialized Muslim. It didn't mean you had to be Muslim, it just meant that people saw you as Muslim. And that could be on the basis of skin color, it could be on the basis of facial hair, head coverings. I mean, in San Antonio where I was, there were a lot of Hispanic folks who were attacked because they had brown skin and facial hair. I mean, it's ridiculous when you think about it, but this is how racism works. There have been stories about Lebanese Christians who have been murdered in hate crimes because they were perceived to be the enemy. South Asians, Hindus who have been attacked. I mean, the list goes on and on. And the first hate crime murder after 9/11, 4 days after, the terrorist attacks was a gas station owner, a Sikh man named Balbir Singh Sodhi. And what I can offer you is his case is unique in a lot of ways, but in his case, unlike many cases, we have evidence of what was going through the killer's mind when he attacked him, both through eyewitness accounts and police records and court documents. And part of what we hear through these different sources from this person's mouth is he wanted to kill Iranians, Middle Easterners, Arabs, towel heads, rag heads. I mean, what you're hearing is a laundry list of identifiers that indicate actually what he has is a broad conception on the basis of articles of clothing, ethnicity, nationality, language, right? He's conflating all of these together and saying all these people fit into my understanding of him, right? Like that's how racialization is happening during this moment. And I, as an 18-year-old, I'm like, what do I do about this, right? Like, how do I live in this world where I am perceived as the enemy, but I don't think I am, and I don't want other people to think I am. And so there's one other piece that I want to offer you here, and that is through this process of coming to grips with my new reality as a racialized Muslim, right? Not as a Muslim, but as a racialized Muslim. I start to have a real empathy for people who I've never met before, right? So this is the other part of the experience that becomes really interesting to me. I grew up in a place, I mean, it wasn't just that there weren't many Sikhs in South Texas, there weren't many Muslims, there weren't many South, I didn't know many people from these groups. My friends, my people were mostly Black, Hispanic, and white. Like, that's what my soccer team looked like, that's what my basketball team looked like, that's what my classmates looked like. And all of a sudden, when I would be going to the airport or to the grocery store, people would say, hey, those aren't your people, these other guys are your people. What happens to me as an 18-year-old, as a 20-year-old, as I'm going through this process is I'm starting to develop a real sense of connection with these communities that I know nothing about and have never met before. This is also part of the process of racialization, right? I'm starting to form a sense of identity that is shared among these people that up until this point, I've never considered my people. But now I'm in college and I'm starting to study I'm starting to study race and racism, right, and anti-Blackness, and this shapes my trajectory going forward. To the point where eventually I do my religious studies degrees and I start teaching Islamic studies in Texas. Now I've been teaching Buddhist history at Union Seminary. And so what is it about this experience that shapes me in such a way that all of a sudden, I mean, I still see all my friends as my friends, right? That hasn't changed. But my own sense of identity has completely transformed. And it's still that way. I mean, I can analyze it and I can describe it for you, but I also know it to be true, that this is how I see myself within the context and within the landscape of modern America. And what I want to offer you is that's also true for all of us in some ways, right? There is a sense of how these constructs, these social constructs, are shaping the world around us and people's perceptions of us, but we're also part of that shaping process, right? We are also being transformed by these ideas and concepts and how we interact with one another. So I'll pause it here. I know we're running on a schedule, but I just wanted to say thank you to you all for being here and for giving me a chance to share. And I'm happy to field any questions, talk about anything. I don't have anything off limits, so please feel free if you want to ask anything or offer any comments. Thank you.
So if there is a student in the audience that wants to ask the first question, that's our tradition at Manhattan.
That's great. That's a good tradition.
Any question? Yes, Christian.
So, did you ever feel that when you grew up in Texas that it would have been easier for you like to just not identify with your religion by taking your turban off and looking like everybody else?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I will say the honest answer, my parents aren't here, so I can give you the honest answer, which is yes. I mean, I'm almost 40 now, and I still worry about my parents. I guess that never goes away. Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is yes. Especially as a kid, especially because my brothers and I, as I was saying, were really into sports. And we ran into all sorts of issues. My older brother had to sit out an entire year of high school basketball, which was his dream because of the turban. And so we would talk all the time about how much life would be easier. I think that there are two things that I would say about that. One is, now I understand that even if I didn't wear a turban, I'd still be a bronze-skinned man in America. So like, you don't escape racism necessarily, right? It might not be as pointed, but it's still there. The other thing that I'd say is, I think my own honest introspection about why I wanted to be Sikh really happened when I was in the later stages of college. So up until then, I would say it was more of like a family inherited tradition, right? It was just like something that I grew up with, and I mean, I liked it, I believed in it, but like, did I really care? Not really. I mean, it was fine. We did it on the weekends, we learned about it in the evenings, but it wasn't really something it wasn't something that I ever thought, if I wasn't this, I would lose something. And in college, it was when I started studying religion really, in the academic sense, but then also at home too, that I started to really get into the ideas, and felt like this was something that could enrich my life. So that's when I really started to appreciate why I wore the turban and felt more committed to it. So, thank you. And don't tell my mom.
Other questions from the general audience?
For me to understand you and reach or cover the gap that you have covered